Hi friends, and welcome back to Granite Garden Cottage. In today's video, we are going to be making a very simple 5-ingredient bread, and 2 of those ingredients are salt and water. So it's very simple, very straightforward bread. This is a great beginner bread for my Thanksgiving series, and we are going to keep this nice and simple so that our Thanksgiving can be stress-free this year. So the ingredients that this recipe calls for are flour. I use all-purpose flour because that's what I stock in my home. But if you have a bread flour, that is even better. And it calls for yeast and butter and salt and water. So we are going to get into it today, and we're going to make a really easy, straightforward Thanksgiving loaf of bread. Okay, my friends, so I have just an all-purpose organic flour here. I have my yeast. I buy my yeast in bulk at BJ's, and I keep it in the freezer. It lasts a very, very long time that way. I have my salt and my butter. And then apart from this, we'll have some warm water, and that will magically turn into a beautiful, delicious loaf of bread. Trust me. So we are going to take a pot, and what I think is the most important tool for this project is a scale. I have a very cheap kitchen scale, but it does the job. Perfect. So we need 500 grams of flour. Yeah. There it is, 500 grams of flour. We need 10 grams of salt. A little bit more salt, but that's okay. 10 grams of yeast. Perfect. And then 30 grams of soft butter. We want butter that has been softened to room temperature. And because I know I'm going to be using this butter, I'm just going to use my fingers to measure this out. It's 10. Almost there. Perfect. Okay, so literally it's this simple. And then we're going to take 300 milliliters of warm water, about 100 degrees, and we're going to pour this into our bread, flour, butter, and yeast mixture. I did put my salt on one side and my yeast on the other side. There's some theory that if they mix too soon, the salt can kill the yeast. So I try to put my salt in on one side, and then I'll mix it in on this side, put the yeast on the other side, mix it in, and then I mix everything together, if that makes sense. Okay, my friends, so you can see in this video that the yeast is over here. There's some butter in here too, but the yeast is over on this side and the salt is over here on this side. So I'm just going to mix the salt in on its half of the bowl. And then I'm going to mix my yeast in on its half of the bowl. And then I will combine them all together. So that way the yeast and the salt are not directly touching. I'm kind of breaking up my butter as I go in here as well, just so it's kind of all mixed together nicely. Perfect. Now let's add our water. So in here I have my warm water. It's about 300 milliliters. I'm going to throw most of this water in. Just start mixing until this whole thing comes together. If you feel like your bread is not coming together with the water you added, you can add the last little bit in here. Great. So we can see that the bread has formed a rough dough. It has come together. So we can pull it out of our bowl and we will start kneading here soon. Before I get to kneading, I do like to add just a little olive oil to my surface so my dough does not stick. And then we're going to knead this for 10 minutes. Okay, so now that we have our dough kneaded for 10 minutes by hand, all we have to do is put it in a bowl that is coated with a small amount of olive oil, and we're just going to cover it with a moist, damp towel and leave it. You can leave it for 1 to 3 hours. I tend to try to stick with a sweet spot of about 2 hours. I find a longer proving time just helps to improve the texture overall. The other thing that you could do with this dough is you could add seasonings to it, some dried herbs. That's not going to alter the ratios at all, but if you do want to add things like jalapenos or cheese, I would just keep in mind the amount of water you're adding to the dough so you can cut back just a little bit on the water content that you're adding in. But I just wanted to show you the very basic recipe. I've been making this bread now for about, I don't know, 6 years maybe, and it is always good. It's a very simple recipe, very basic. I don't necessarily have the motivation to become an expert bread maker, so this recipe really has held its own for that length of time, and I probably will not change the fact that I prefer to use this recipe. So I have this damp tea cloth towel. I'm just going to cover this up and kind of tuck the sides. That's it. Just going to leave this for about 2 hours and then I will come back and I'll knock it down.
Unfortunately, I had some audio issues during the filming of this portion, so I am having to do a voiceover to kind of explain what's going on in this segment. So you can see that our bread has risen. I actually kept it rising and proving for about 2.5 hours. And that was mostly because I got pulled away by life. And so it ended up being about a half hour longer than I had expected it to be. But luckily, this bread is very forgiving. And a proof time of up to 3 hours is totally appropriate for this bread. So you could do as little as an hour up to 3 hours. So I, really appreciate a bread that allows me to get tied up in the happenings of life and then come around to it when I can. So I'm going to knock this bread back here so that we can shape it and get ready for the second proof. One thing I wanted to talk to you guys about, if you're new to bread making and you're a little bit daunted by bread making, this is a wonderful recipe to get yourself started. Anybody can make a wonderful loaf of bread using this method and this recipe. This is actually the Paul Hollywood crusty cob loaf recipe. So if you are looking to find the specifics for this recipe, you could definitely look it up online. I've been using it, like I said, for about 6 to 7 years now, and it's always turned out really wonderful for me. I will say as well that this bread, or really making any bread, I suppose, is very forgiving in the sense that if you kill your yeast and your bread doesn't rise, you can roll it out to make crackers or pizza dough. If your bread, falls in the oven and doesn't rise in the oven, you could cut it up and make stuffing with it, like I'm going to do here. Or you can make breadcrumbs with it, croutons. There's just so many other things that you can make with a failed loaf of bread that it really does offer you the opportunity to play and experiment with bread making without worrying that you're wasting your time or your ingredients. So here, moving on into this dough again, you can see that I'm shaping the dough into a ball. I'm kind of pulling from the top toward the bottom and tucking the dough under the bottom. That's going to make a nice smooth top, and then the bottom's going to be kind of rolled up underneath. When this rises, it should rise into a nice ball shape and give us the nice cob loaf appearance that we're looking for. For this second proof, we really want to stay to about an hour for our proving time. We don't necessarily want to do the 2 to 3 hour proofing time that we had done for the initial round of proofing. This time around, we really want to set our timer and keep an eye on the clock to only do about an hour. If we overproof on the second round, the bread can kind of start to fall a little bit and lose its structure. So we want to come back around in about an hour and then we'll score this bread and get it in the oven. So once again, we will just cover this dough loosely with a damp cloth. This helps prevent a hard skin from forming and preventing the dough from rising to its full potential. And we'll come back in an hour.
Okay, you guys, so I had some audio issues in the last clip, so hopefully the voiceover does an appropriate job of explaining what I was doing. But we have finished the second proof, and as you can see, our bread has risen very nicely. So there's just a couple more steps to be sure that this bread ends up being the best texture and having the best rise as possible. So the first thing I'm going to do is take a knife and do some cross-hatch scores in this bread, and it's just going to help open it up so it can bloom and rise in the oven. And then the second thing that I have done is I have my oven up at a ridiculously high temperature. It's at 450 degrees Fahrenheit, and I have an empty metal pan in the oven. When I go to put this bread in the oven, I'm going to fill that empty metal pan with water. That's going to help create steam inside the oven, and it's going to help this bread rise and have a really nice texture. Okay, friends, the bread is done. Tell me that would not impress your family at Thanksgiving, especially if you're used to buying pre-made rolls or packaged rolls and you just heat them up in the oven. This is going to impress your family so much. It's so easy, it's so simple, and honestly delicious. It smells so good. I wish there was like smell-o-vision that I could share this with you because fresh homemade bread always smells so amazing. So go ahead and give this recipe a try. It's really very difficult to mess this recipe up. Even if your bread isn't perfectly shaped, it's always delicious. It always has a wonderful texture. And let me show you. Isn't that amazing? So good, guys. You have to try making your own bread this year if you don't already. So give this recipe a try and let me know how it goes. In the next video, I'm going to be cutting this up and prepping it for stuffing. And I think I'm going to make my stuffing ahead of time this year and freeze it until Thanksgiving so I can share that recipe with you as well. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any more episodes of our Thanksgiving from Scratch series. Thanks again, guys. Bye.